What's up, everyone? This is the Next Tate podcast, episode 34 with Mikel and
Tanyka,
where we have conversations on different topics. So today we have a great topic today, everybody. Tanyka, would you like to share that with the people?
Yeah, so it's Mental Health Awareness Month. So we're going to be shedding light on mental health. Yeah.
Yep. No, and we also have some guesses on this episode as well. So
how we're doing the guests with this episode, and we're going to be doing kind of little mini conversations with each of them in different points of the episode, so we can introduce them when we're getting to them, just so there's no confusion. But we're going to have 3 different guests having kind of mini conversations with them, and yeah, that's basically how we're doing it.
Okay. All right. Let's get to this episode.
So we're just going to have more of like a conversation. There's not going to be many like notes in this case. It's because I think this is something that, at least for me anyways, I can talk very freely about and not necessarily have to do notes. So for me, mental health, or better yet, we're going to say mental illness, in this case, is something that I have dealt with in my family since as long as I can remember. Kind of the quote-unquote joke in my world is, on the one hand, I have diabetes. On the other hand, I have mental illness. When it comes to the family dynamics on both sides. And on my mother's side is where the mental health lies. I have family members who have clinical depression. I have, like, my own mother has dealt with panic attacks for as long as I can remember, anxiety, and everything that kind of comes with that. I've had family members with schizophrenia that I didn't know personally, but I've heard through the grapevine after the fact. There's a lot with mental health aspect of things that is kind of under wraps a little bit too. But I've had family members who have been checked into mental health facilities and died of unknown causes. So it's been quite an interesting family that I'm a part of, and a lot of this is on my maternal grandfather's side of the family. Her father, sorry, my grandpa, her father. So it's been quite a lot. And I believe there is a family member of my grandpa, I think it's his cousin, that has wrote many books. She's very famous actually within the Jamaican community. And it has been known, at least among the family, that some of her stories are very loosely based on my family and the mental illness that runs in the family. It's just it's quite insane, the amount of mental illness that runs in that side of the family. That is quite incredible. It's only what I can think of. My great grandma who I only met once. She died when I was 6. She lived in Jamaica. So it was when I went to Jamaica, and when I was 4 was the only time I met her. And she suffered mentally as well. So it was just so much. I don't know. My grandpa never really talks about if he ever really suffers, but his children definitely have mentally. So yeah. But for me, because I'm perfectly fine talking about me, I never really dealt with any type of anxiety or anything like that for most of my life. And I think for me, when it started to, I think I always had it in me. Obviously, I think it's always been in there. I don't know anyone who doesn't deal with it, who doesn't have some form of anxiety, even if you're just unaware of it. I think anxiety is either just in there, waiting for the trigger, or you're already dealing with it. So I think I've always known that I was prone to dealing with some form of mental health condition or something. I don't know exactly what to call it, but I knew I could potentially deal with it. And, you have moments, being in school, the stressors of that, or relationships, or whatever, that can either, when you're in your teens or early 20s, 9 times out of 10, they're going to go horrific. But I met my ex-husband at a very young age. I was 22. He was too, but we were both very young. And we fell hard and we fell fast. And with it means that the heartbreak was going to be just as bad. And when I found out he cheated on me, I spiraled. I was spiraling before I knew officially that he was cheating, but I knew something was wrong. And the spiraling and the mental anguish that I was putting myself through, that he was not helping with, it just was going on for months and months and months. And then the mental anguish that kind of went after I found out, and trying to fix the relationship, because I wasn't perfect either. I'll admit I cheated as well, I think in retaliation, but I still did. There's no denying it. And we both said, okay, let's try to make this work. And with that came marriage, and with that came his deportation kind of looming over us as well. And there's just so much kind of just going on in my life. But with the marriage kind of happening, the woman that he had cheated on me with, I did not know she was pregnant. I had no clue. I did not find out until she gave birth. She gave birth 3 weeks after I found out. So I didn't even have a chance to let this sink in before she had the baby. And he never told me. It wasn't him that told me. It was her cousin that told me initially. And again, there's another spiral, because here's a person that I was actually trying to get pregnant with. We were actively trying. And I find out that he had gotten her pregnant instead. And I won't go into the gritty details with that, but that's what happened. And then with him becoming a father to someone else's child, he got deported 2 weeks later, which finding out he was being deported and finding out he was a father overlapped. So there's so much things going on. with him finally, being sent back, him leaving, and the lack of sleep, the lack of eating, the everything, just, I went to complete shits, honestly. And then I think with all of that kind of happening, again, this all happened in the span of about 2 years, with him now gone and me doing what I need to do to sponsor him back up, because I can do that as his wife. I could have done that, and we were working on that. With that happening, so for those who maybe have done it here in Canada or even in the States, it goes both ways. If you know you have a child, doesn't matter the circumstances, doesn't matter the country they live in, you have to say you have a child. You have to claim them on the application. And my ex is an idiot. So instead of just getting the information that I needed, which was very basic, I just needed his daughter's name. I knew what day she was born, so I already knew that. I just needed very basic information. And he couldn't give me that basic information. He told me to go to her mother. And me and her mother did not get along at all. We hated each other because we were both the enemies to each other, basically. I tried to be nice with her because I'm a nice person. I can separate my shit and be like, his loyalties were to me. Yeah, she knew about me at one point, but I can let those things go if she just wouldn't allow for it. So I'm like, okay, whatever. I don't want anything to do with her. But she used my kindness to get back at me and at him. So there was many things that were going on, but the big thing, the thing that triggered my anxiety after all of this was I was being harassed by her family, by her friends. And this was going on for, I would say, about a month to 2 months, where I was getting harassed constantly by people that I didn't know, but I knew they were connected to her. And I would block one person and another person would show up. I'd block them and then another. And even my friend, who, I'll say her name because she was supposed to be on this podcast, and she was also on my friend Letitia, my closest friend. She's known me since I was 8 years old. Said, like, I also got involved and cussed out one of her cousins and said, leave her alone. Your issues are not with her, they are with him. And at the end of the day, though, it doesn't matter. They're married. Leave her alone. And my ex wasn't doing much to stop it. Like, he would always say, well, I'm not there. When I was there, I would stop it. And, I would give him that. He very much was a buffer when he was physically here. But once he was gone, he was no longer that buffer. And it's like, okay, you may not be here, but you can still message her. You can still do whatever you need to do as the common denominator between the two of us. And he wouldn't do that. So eventually it got to the point where I had to go to the police to see what could be done. I sent a letter suggested by the police, and I'm pretty sure if I dig deep in my emails, I still have a copy of it. I dug deep. Like, in this letter, I basically just kept it very surface level. I was very respectful and basically just said, I would ask you to please refrain from contacting me. There's no reason for us to be talking. I ask that you stop, that you get other people to stop, or I will need to take this further than what I'm doing. And that was kind of the first step. And again, suggested by the police. And she even took that letter and twisted it and said I was disrespecting her. I was talking like nonsense about their daughter. And I'm like, what? Like, I think she said I threatened her daughter. And I'm like, no, I didn't. And again, the dynamic between me and him during this time wasn't great either. And that's the last thing we needed under the circumstances, with him not physically being in the country and us having to adjust to that. It wasn't great. But with all of this that happened, was when the anxiety set in, and I could feel that I was having anxiety attacks. I never quite understood, but when I think it was some sort of, I can't remember exactly who it was, but it was some sort of practitioner that I would see, and they said, like, do you feel, actually no, it was recent, it was actually my physiotherapist, and this was in the last year or so, because I only started seeing her recently. And she's like, do you feel like you have like this vibrating sensation throughout your body? And I said, yeah, I do. And she's like, that's anxiety. And I'm like, oh, because I'm like, it literally feels like, okay, for my nerds out there, it literally feels like when the Flash would like shake and was able to go through walls when he was shaking. That's how it feels inside all the time. And I'm like, okay, that is what I'm dealing with. And I knew this at that point, but it was kind of interesting to kind of hear from that perspective. But I was always on high alert all the time. I would see messages after the fact from her too. I was just always on high alert when it came to this. I mean, eventually, obviously, I left him, but it didn't change the fact that I'd went through this. And when I went through something very similar again with my current relationship, because we have been off and on with each other for almost 7 years. So when we were half off, he was in a relationship. He was with a live-in girlfriend. And because we weren't quite done with each other, we knew this. And, because we weren't, his girlfriend kind of knew that, she made my life a living hell as well. And I won't go into the details with that, because it is my current relationship and we're long past it now. But with everything that happened in that situation, this was about 4 or 5 years ago, with everything that happened in the situation, just set me right back into a place where I was doing a lot better. I wasn't dealing with these things, but it's not great. And I think, again, it's kind of coming out of that. As a woman, also, it's kind of dealing with the ups and the downs of your fertility as well, because I deal with that. It's also very trying, but I think, like, I gotta say to myself, like, I gotta give myself grace, and I'll get through it. But sometimes that's easier said than done. But yeah, I think, like, the one thing that I've kind of learned, and I learned this from my naturopath, who I've known for many, many years, and he told me, like, when I kind of started seeing him a little more frequently, which would have been before COVID, because this was when I saw him physically, and I told him, like, yeah, I'm dealing with the anxiety now, and I wasn't before, and now I am. And he is like, okay, let me give you a trick. Now, obviously, I can't actually demonstrate this, but if you're ever with someone, demonstrate this and see how it works. So he told me, he's like, okay, what I'm going to do is I want you to put your arm straight out in front of you. And he's like, I'm going to push down on your hand. And when I say yes, I'm going to push down, I have to say yes as he's pushing down and see what your hand does. So when I said yes, continually as he's pushing down, my arm is staying straight and not moving. It's like, okay, now I want you to say no. And I'm going to do the same thing. So I did that, saying no. And my arm just goes down. It's like a feather. It's just going down. And I'm like, whoa. And he's like, yeah, because if you're negative about it, your body's going to respond. If you're positive, your body's going to respond. And I was so in awe of this that I went to work after this and said, oh my God, I love this new thing. So I was showing everybody and they're like, oh my God. And I think from that, I've learned, again, sometimes easier said than done, but try to be positive.
Yeah.
And that helps. It doesn't take it away. It's not going to take it away, but it's going to help. And I do my best to stay positive. I am an advocate for therapy. That helps too. But I always do worry about my future kids, kind of having to deal with the potential mental health that they might face. It's not just for me. My boyfriend deals with it too, pretty badly actually, probably a lot worse than me. And his triggers are, he definitely was triggered, but I won't talk about what triggered him, but he was definitely triggered and he hasn't been the same since. And I worry about my kids, but we'll do our best. Unfortunately, mental health, I think, is a cycle, but we'll do our best. It's all you can do. So yeah, that's my journey through it.
For me, well, actually, let me say this to you, Tanyka. So, thank you for sharing your experiences on,
I think it's good to share too, because it's just you can learn from people as well.
Right.
And know, like, when this happens, don't be ashamed of it. Don't don't pretend like it's not happening. Just face it head on. Do what you have to do to combat it. Whatever works for you, whether it's therapy or if it's, depending on the scale of it, maybe you need medication. I don't know. But it's so don't be ashamed of it. And I think that's the biggest thing, is shedding light on mental health.
Exactly. Like I said, thank you for sharing. Very brave woman for sharing all that. And that goes the same with all you. Like, don't be ashamed to be sharing what's going on. So for me, I'm just going to do this really short, because I feel like I'm basically the most quiet guy, and when I see, and I'm not saying this for everybody else, and when I see stress, I tend to avoid away from it. As you guys hear me on the podcast, I'm like the most quiet person, so like I don't hardly talk. It's all basically Tanyka is always, the lead, which is, and she helps me, to talk more and more and more. So like I thank her for doing that. But going into my life, and if my family knows who I am, I'm like the most quiet person ever. I try to avoid stress. I try to avoid trouble. I try to avoid any type of bad influence in any type of situation. So, I'm trying to think of like, what gets me depressed. Obviously, like I had past relationship with like, girlfriends, and, breakups happen. And I get depressed on that, but it just takes me like, a couple weeks to like, recover. Now, I'm not saying this is like everybody does this, this is me basically. And another thing is that like, I don't know how to explain this without, going to straight detail. I didn't grow up with the greatest dad or father of all time. So that was very hard for me to, grow as a person, and, finding who I am as a person as well. Yeah. I would say that's one of the things that, I've been struggling with. I think I still kind of struggle with that today, finding yourself. But it has gotten better over the years. Another thing is that, I think that's about it. I can't think in any other events other than, those two situations, relationship, having like, obviously every family has family issues, and then yeah, pretty much that's basically my experiences. I don't have, traumatic events that happen to me, because like I said, I avoid those type of situations as much as possible. And I also like see and learn. So when I see something that's, like in the media or, videos or anything, I see it and then it just, then what's that word that I'm missing, Tanyka?
Avoid?
Not avoid, but like I see it and then it just ingrades into my brain, and then I just like, that's basically who I am as a person. So, quiet guy, just a quiet guy, and yeah. Sorry I didn't have anything to share more for you guys. I know this is not, a lot.
What I'll say,
yeah,
just by listening to you,
yeah,
and I mean, again, I do. There, and again, it's your story to tell, so I'm not going to go into any details. But I do wonder if certain things you've gone through, in your life, could also be either things that could be the reason why maybe you choose to just kind of let things go or not let things bother you or anything like that. I do wonder if it's more of a coping mechanism. And I don't know, maybe for me, hearing you kind of say that you kind of let things kind of just not bother you or whatever, or you maybe avoid certain things or whatever, I just wonder if that could be coping. And my question would be, what are you trying to avoid, in mentally speaking? But that's something you have to explore. That's something.
Oh no. That's, you can ask me any questions. This is what.
Well, when it comes to your mental health, though, it's because you seem to be in a place of, and again, whatever you're doing to protect your health, your mental health, I don't want to like pry and like poke holes in that, because hold on to that as much as possible. But it's just like,
Yeah.
I just do wonder if, like, again, I've known you a long time. I feel like it.
Go ahead, no.
It could be coping. You could be coping for something. Like, obviously, I know the history of your dad and all that. Those alone, that alone, like what you went through as a child, what you went through with your father, those are all traumatic experiences. I've learned to know, like, traumatic experience doesn't have to be this big thing that happens. It could be these smaller things that are still traumatic. And like, I've learned a certain thing that I dealt with as a child when it came to my dad is considered a traumatic thing, and I've responded accordingly. And it's, so I do wonder if, like, you're not dealing with certain things or choosing to ignore certain things or whatever, as a coping.
I'm guessing I'm trying to protect my peace,
and that's okay. And again, that is something, like I said, like, I don't want to poke too much, because, like, if that is something you're doing and it's working for you, then great. Because, like, you don't want, like, with me, again, I think I was doing a lot of the same thing. Again, when you're young, nothing can hurt you, you think, but I think once the hole was poked, the dam came through, and
100%.
Yeah, so that was for me.
Here's the thing. I don't like to. There's a lot. I just don't like to, like, express a lot of situations, but I can just tell you one event that kind of put my hole. When I did live at an apartment, right, and I had a friend that lived with me, and obviously she's a female, and she kind of put my holes in a lot of ways that I never had. Like, I was going through, it was hell, because like basically what I was trying to do for her was try to let her into my apartment, because she was evicted away from her apartment, and I was trying to help her out. So she just wanted to live for, like, 3 months, and let's just say that things got hectic within the second and third month, because she just got into, I would say, don't want to speak for her, but like she got into like drugs, right? So that, just say
and
that.
that's right. Like, so out of your world. I mean, guys, he doesn't even drink, so like that is like so far out of your world. Yeah, she was into it, and then basically it just got bad, and then it's just basically I was giving her like second, the third chances, trying to tell her, maybe you should try to get some help, and then she's just like, just all hell break loose into my apartment, like, Yeah, and that's the thing that's the thing when you're dealing with someone with, and again, I know this personally, I'm not going to say who it is, but someone, let's just say someone very close to me has dealt with addiction, not with drugs, but alcohol, and they have to want the help. And when they're especially with drugs, it's so different. Once you're in the throes of that, you're no longer talking to the person, you're talking to the drugs. And the drugs doesn't want it, right? So that's the problem. It's like, again, so far out of your wheelhouse that it's just like you're triggering the drug. You're not triggering the person anymore. And they have to want the help. Now, the person in my life who I love dearly is doing a lot better, but it took, like, again, okay, I'm probably just gonna I've never said his name. He's not on the podcast. It is my boyfriend. This is who I'm talking about. I've known him, like I said, 7 years. And I've known his struggle with alcohol through pretty much from the first month of my relationship with him. And he's done a lot. He's had the DUIs. Or DUI, I should say. He gotten into accidents, drunk. He's done all of that. And he's done the, okay, I'm going to stop drinking for a month or 2 or 3, but then I'm going to get back on it and drink again for another 2, 3, 4 months again. And this is a cycle that he would do. But eventually now he's doing everything that he needs to do. And he's doing so much better. And again, with the drinking, with his mental state, it was a recipe for disaster. And so, but at least he's doing a lot better now, but they have to want the help. I could tell him as much as I wanted, you need help, you need help, you need help. Let me help you. Let me say where the next AA meeting is or whatever. Let me help you. Yeah. And he had to want the help. And the person he is now when it comes to that is doing so well. He's so dedicated to doing what he needs to do. And they just have to know. And again, like I said, it took almost 7 years for him to get to that point. And he's had a lot happen in his life that I think didn't help the addiction. But like his mom passed away. He's been through so much. And he is doing so much better now. But yeah, they need to know. But when you're so unaware of how bad it can get, and you have that in your home and in your space, that I don't even know what I would do. Man, anyway.
It's just they have to want the help because like you can't just tell them or force them. You know, like they have to know for themselves that they have to want that help. So okay. Well, all right.
We are going to shift gears from our conversation to a conversation with some guests. So the first guest that we're going to have is someone by the name of Jake Didinsky. Hopefully I said his name right. Or sorry, their name right. Their pronouns, they, them. So hopefully I said the name right. But we're going to have them on and we're going to kind of talk about their experiences through their mental health. So here we are having a conversation with Jake, and you can introduce yourself in a minute. So we're just going to have a little bit of a conversation on your journey. Now, just as a disclaimer, because we would have been with Mikel a second ago in the episode. Mikel is not on this portion of the episode, and then we'll hear from him again later. But Jake, would you like to introduce yourself to everybody right off the bat, and then we can get into the conversation?
Yeah. So hi, first and foremost, thank you for having me. I know we have been going back and forth trying to make it work, but I'm happy to finally be here. So my name is Jake. Jake Didinsky is my legal name, but a lot of people know me as Jake Maxwell as a DJ. I am a non-binary, ADHD, autistic, bisexual, disabled, down the line, walking ball of fun depending on the day. And, I am also a champion for like the idea of mental health and understanding that it's like okay to talk to people and that you're never alone, even though sometimes it feels like you might be.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the whole point of this episode, is just shedding light on everything and knowing like you're not the only one. So first and foremost is where do you want to start the conversation? Because again, like you said, you have many things going on. Do you want to talk about spectrum diagnosis? Do you want to talk about the ADHD, kind of how they kind of come together and kind of how you deal with it on a day-to-day basis and what you'd use for coping and through it? Because I've been open with the fact that my brother is on the spectrum, so kind of just curious how it is for you.
So I think the first place to start, like when we're talking about anything to do with mental health, right, is establishing the baseline upon which like we can view this. And I think that most people would tell you that mental health is always this or always that. And I'm here to tell you that that is not true. Mental health takes many, many different forms and manifests in like many, many different forms. And sometimes we don't even realize it's manifesting. Case in point, right? I'm a professional DJ. So I see a lot of people go through very brief stints of depression after major parties. We call it event drop. But a lot of new people wouldn't know what to look for. And those signs and things, like, it kind of helps illuminate the fact that I think we as a society have been trained to believe that having any type of mental health concern or wanting to get help for mental health, like, it's a weakness. And I disagree. I think it's actually the biggest sign of strength you can take. So I think if we start there as a baseline, right, and then work our way through why it's okay, I think that's kind of the starting point.
Right.
And so I say it like that to say that, you know, growing up, it was very apparent to me that I was different, right? Like, I mean, I was hyperactive. I have been on Concerta since before it was FDA approved, like during the test phases. That's how long I've been on Concerta, still am. I also, you know, went through all of high school with an IEP. Mm-hmm. And more to the point, you know, realized I was pretty, you know, much on the spectrum. And I don't like the term high functioning autism. I hope someday we will develop something better, because that implies the opposite end of that, which I don't think is true.
Right. That is exactly it. My brother is considered that as well. Yeah. And
so knowing that you're different, being in school, it can pose its own unique challenges, right? And so there were certainly times when I struggled, but I was always led to believe that I should change everything about how I am, who I am, and how I act to fit into what we would consider normal society. And I'm going to drop a really hot take here and maybe some breaking news for your podcast, which is to say, I don't really think there's such a thing as normal society.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I think that society is whatever society wants to be, but the idea of what is normal and what is not, well, I don't know who gets to determine that per se, but to me, as someone who's on the spectrum, everyone who isn't, y'all are the weird ones. like that's how I see it. So that's kind of where I've grown. And I think that over time, now that I'm 31, I've gone from this I should try to hide the way I see the world is a bad thing to no, the way I see the world is actually an advantage. Everybody else is playing checkers. I'm out here playing 4-dimensional chess. And that's inherently, to me, something I'm very proud of.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. I feel like, again, even with my brother, because it took a very long time to diagnose him with something. We knew something was going on. It's not normal for a baby to line up his toy cars in a row, and God forbid if you touched even slightly one of them, he would freak out. And we knew something was wrong. We went a really long time without a diagnosis for him. But even when we finally did get a diagnosis, sometimes you got teachers who were understandable, who understood, who maybe didn't fully understand the diagnosis, but tried their best to help. And then you had people, even our family doctor, who would deny the fact that he was on the spectrum. And it's like, so what do you explain? Because he may not present, and I think partially with him, he's also maybe a little narcissistic, because it can be a yes and in the situation. But the thing is, he's so aware of how I act at home and how I act out in public is very different. I can't act how I act at home because I'm a little different, and that just makes him who he is, and we're used to that. But because of that, and he's able to present himself in such a way where he doesn't come across, you wouldn't know that he's autistic unless you ask him or he tells you. You would get those people who are like, no, he's not autistic, he's fine, like there's nothing wrong with him. It's not that someone should there's something wrong with him, there's nothing wrong with him, but don't deny the fact that he's on the spectrum. And it's when you have that pushback, it's when you don't have the resources. And again, with my brother, he's, how old is he now? 21. We didn't have a lot of resources. And I'm not sure, like, through your childhood with your parents, like, did you have a lot of resources? Is it better? Because I think you're from the States, correct? Right. Is the resources better in the States? Because here in good old Canada, they're sparse.
So what I will say is this. In America, if you come from a family that either the parent is a lawyer or knows the education system well and you're able to get an IEP, which is an individualized education plan, you have a shot, right?
Right, which he did have an IEP, right. Yeah.
My mother was a lawyer, or is a lawyer. She hates when I say was, because like she's not longer practicing, but she is still a lawyer.
Right.
And I'm not super close to my family, for the record. Like, we talk, but like we're not the world's best friends. But my mother very quickly, made sure that I was getting an IEP plan and not a 504, and we could go into a different podcast at some point about the whole differences between what is an educational requirement versus what is an educational suggestion. But the point is, I had an IEP plan. Now, at a certain point, somebody realized, just as a brief history of my schooling, in third grade they wanted to fail me because I couldn't write cursive.
Oh wow.
But they gave me a bunch of testing, and they're like, we can't fail the kid. He's reading at a college and writing at a college level.
Right.
So then they were like, well, we should skip him ahead of grade. And, third grader me is like, this is a lot, for me to take in, because you told me I was staying here, and now you're asking if I want to, skip the fourth grade, and I kind of just want to, stay with my friends, if that's, all the same. And I did. So then fast forward to high school. I was taking my first AP class, and I had an AP World History teacher tell me that I shouldn't be in her class because I had an IEP. And my mother loved that. Really, truly, yeah.
She sounds like my mom.
Yeah, she was not having any of that. And I'm also very proudly from North Philadelphia. So even though I was going to school in Virginia at the time, I made sure I got a perfect score on that IEP test, or on the AP test. And then she said to me, and I quote, well, I'm never going to say anything like that about another student with an IEP. I'm like, good, don't.
Yeah.
And ultimately, what was the breaking point with her at that school, because it took 3 high schools to finally figure out how to deal with me, was I was a part of the journalism team, the newspaper at my second high school, and the journalism teacher told me that I wouldn't be able to go on our train system, the Metro, with the school to the museum, because she didn't want to be responsible for my, quote, medical conditions, and that even though I had qualified for the equivalent of a Pulitzer Prize for high school journalism, that if I wanted to go to New York with the school to accept it, I'd have to go on my own dollar, my own dime, and stay in my own room, at which point my mom said, okay, new school.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And those are considered not horror stories compared to some of the other things that I've currently seen. Just as a brief slight tangent here, since we're here, one of the things that I feel is important, and anyone who hears this, please take the time to research this, is that currently, not just in the U.S., but really around the world, special education programs are directly under attack. They're easy to cut. A lot of times the parents of those students don't have as much free time as, say, some of the other parents to fight those things. And there just seems to be this movement right now to try to cut it under the guise of saving money. One example is the county in which I live in is currently cutting its one autism learning center, which handles the students who have really severe needs from the school system K through 5. And sorry, I'm getting emotional because
that's okay.
A hard one for me. So I've been working with the parents to try to stop it, because the school holds 50 to 60 students. It wasn't really clear how or why they decided to cut it, but they did. And that's going to go into effect next year. And we're concerned. And it's not just here. It's all around the country. Mm-hmm. And the reason we have special education and IDEA and IEPs and all these things is to give every single student an equal chance to be successful in the world, right? Regardless of whatever they may have. And so if anyone's been an earshot of my voice, I just would encourage them to be like, hey, parents' rights aren't just for Moms of Liberty or any other group that wants to yell, right? It's for everybody, which means that you are totally okay to advocate for your student, whether it's here, whether it's Canada, just wherever you are not, and sorry, I hate to use this word, but some people will say that parents can sometimes cross the line trying to get what's best for their student. I disagree. As long as it's
that's not the thing.
You're doing everything you can, right?
Absolutely.
And so I encourage it.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, like, who's going to advocate for your child if not your parent? Like, I've come from family who will do just about anything to ensure their child is getting the proper education and getting the respect through their education. I mean, my mom, as I said, did so much for my brother. Even me, I was being assessed for learning disability when I was about 7. And even with my grandpa, with my uncle, when he was in school, my uncle, he was considered so smart he could teach a class, and they wanted to, I guess, put him somewhere else. I don't know the whole detail, but my mom will never forget seeing my grandpa and the principal literally in each other's faces. I mean that literally, and about ready to just knock down for my uncle. And my grandpa crossing my mom in the hallway, it's like, see you later. Like, that's what parents should do for their kids. And there's no such thing as a parent crossing a line. I feel like that's more the education system kind of being like, stay out of our way. But that's not going to happen.
Well, listen, we could do an entire 2 hours on my thoughts on the education system, but to save you from that, one of the things you did bring up was parents. And so as a quick pivot, if you don't mind, to bring us back to the mental health idea, it's, hi, parents. I want to talk directly to you, our parents in the audience, for like a half a second, if it's okay, because I think it's important.
Absolutely.
One of the biggest things I can tell you, as someone who has struggled immensely with many mental health issues, anxiety, depression, literally throw a dart, you name it, right? Parents, I think, sometimes don't necessarily always realize the full role in which they can play in trying to help and alleviate, right? I think that every parent would tell you, especially first-time parents, that when a child is born, they do not get a book that tells them how to be a parent. And I think that children, especially first and oldest, myself being one, sometimes forget that we were the instruction manual in some ways for our parents.
Same here.
And so I think there's like a give and take as you get older that you start to understand that. One thing I would stress is that right now, especially if you have a kid that is currently in middle school, high school, elementary school, or going to college, it's rough out there. Like, it is. Like, it is. Even harder than it was for me. You've got students who are literally doing drills upon what to do, like if there's a tragic situation, right? That on its own can cause like very clearly identified PTSD for anyone, let alone for students whose minds are still developing.
Absolutely.
And so what I would encourage parents to do is, I feel like sometimes parents walk this very hard to walk line of trying to be overprotective and not protective at the same time. And I think sometimes just talking to your kid, right? Like, just casually, because what you might find is that if they know the door is open, they might feel like you're someone they can talk to. I know through my own experience that there were times when I absolutely would have loved to have talked to my mother about things, but we just didn't have that type of relationship. My grandmother and I did, though, and we would spend hours upon hours on the phone. She's who I first came out to as bisexual. Right. But sometimes when we are feeling kind of hopeless, it is important to know that we have those lifelines, and lifelines present themselves in sometimes the most weird ways. I know that sounds bizarre, but oh, hey, younger kid whose name we could make up for the purposes of this. I saw this TikTok video. Let's talk about this thing. Like, whatever you need to do. I may seem cheesy, but it does ultimately accomplish the goal here, which is talking. And that is kind of where I'm trying to get to, which is that we need to talk to each other more in general. That's just like, it's like, otherwise, what are we doing?
Right. And that's the thing. Like, we have this kind of thing of, at least for me anyways, a suffer in silence type situation. And I went it through, kind of my journey through kind of discovering that, oh, here we go, I'm dealing with anxiety, and this is something that is in my family history, pretty deep in my family history. And you kind of hope like you'll be the one that doesn't get it, but you kind of get that suffer in silence. And not a lot of people, except for maybe one close friend of mine, really understood what I was going through, because I didn't talk about it, and even in my current relationship, I don't talk about it, but or I wasn't anyways. And it's something that we have begun to be a little more open with, because he deals with his thing, I deal with mine. And I'm always that person's like, talk to me if you need to talk to me. I'm here. I'm always here. And we are getting a little more open with that, but because it does help. I think just the mere you're not alone is so beneficial. And from there, it can just blossom into whatever else you may need for your own personal situation. So with you being on the spectrum, you're also dealing with ADHD.
Yeah.
Which I think is actually not, it's pretty common. I hear a lot of different people who have said, I'm on spectrum and I'm also have ADHD. And I mean, there's one person in particular I can think of top of my head right now who I don't know personally, but if you are a 90 Day fan, Statler was one of the people who is on the spectrum and is also has ADHD, and it seems to be pretty common. So how do you kind of navigate through that? Is it similar with dealing with being on the spectrum? Is it completely different? Like, what do you kind of deal with?
So, I like to describe my ADHD in that, so this is threefold, because I have the ADHD, the autism, the anxiety, depression, and also I'm dealing with also all that, the underlying mitochondrial disease, right? So I'm living life. But I like to describe my ADHD moments in that I can write you a 300-page book in probably 2 hours, and then you will not hear any updates about said book for 6 months. And that is just because when I narrow in on, so if you're just ADHD, right, you might hyper-focus.
Right.
If you're ADHD and autistic, you find something that you think you might like, you hyper-focus to the point where it starts to actually cause you to have like a stressful breakdown, and then you stop. And then you come back to it. It's kind of this fun little game of how far can I go before I basically need to like take a break.
Right.
But some people would tell you that's a disadvantage. I take the opposite approach. I think it makes me uniquely qualified to do a lot of things. I am a DJ and a music producer.
Yeah.
And one of the ways in which I'm able to work through a lot of my whatever's going on is through music. Like that is it.
Music is your therapy.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, because I feel like traditional therapy has failed me a lot of the time. Music is my therapy, because when I'm playing music, so like when I'm playing for a crowd, I have now established myself as a DJ. People will go in here all around the world, and that's great. But when we're there, one of my main components is I don't really like people to be on their phones or taking videos, because I want them to live in that moment.
Live in the moment, yeah. Which we don't do enough of.
No, we don't. We don't. And the reason I say it like this is like, look, I don't know whatever issues you had going on before you walked in, What I do know is that for the next 4 hours, you're here with me and this audience, and all I want you to care about is what's happening in this room.
Right.
And that's kind of how I approach my music sets. It's like, look, there have been times case in point, when my ex Beyonce and I broke up, that was the night of me having to go and DJ a really big show. It would have been probably it was rough. It would have been acceptable for me to not want to play that show, but I did. It was still considered one of the best shows I've played to date. But my point is that when I ask people to do things, it's only if I am also willing to do them myself. But yes, so how it affects me is that I am all over the place. I have a lot of interests, but I also have a lot of struggles. A lot. Like, I mean, I think that I'm a really good actor. Like, in the sense that everybody seems to think I have my entire life together because I have to portray it that way, and they don't ever actually look under the hood enough to know that sometimes I'm like really close to freaking out.
You're speaking to my heart, man.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, like, it comes with it because, so I think anyone who is at least slightly famous or more, right, would tell you that everybody wants to have any sort of fame up and until the point they actually get it and they realize, I don't want this.
I don't want this, yeah.
And that's because everybody thinks they know me. Most of them I've never met. And I feel like at times I have to be this whatever they've conjectured up in their mind for all of these people. And that's really hard to balance with the fact that, no, wait a minute, I'm also a person.
Exactly.
And like, yeah, so you are correct in that when I say that, yeah, this is all great and I love what I do, conversely, I've had to remind myself in the last year that I'm also a person with my own thoughts and feelings, and that's okay. And it's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think just giving yourself grace through things, being kind to yourself. I think, honestly, first and foremost, to be kind to others is to be kind to yourself. And, you know, it's easier maybe sometimes said than done, but it's, you know, definitely a step in the right direction of just self-care, I think is the main thing. So also just out of kind of curiosity, I'm not sure if this really does feed into your mental health as well. Maybe it probably does to some extent, so you can elaborate on that. But you did mention that you have mitochondrial disease.
Yeah.
Explain that.
Yeah. So the easiest way to explain mitochondrial disease is basically we all remember from like biology class, right? Like mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, makes 95% of the body's ATP energy. Okay, cool. So fun facts time with Jake. If you can imagine a little mitochondria cell and think of it like 5 individual rooms, all right? And if one or more of those rooms doesn't work right, then you have a mitochondrial disease. Now, in layman's terms, what that means is that nothing in your body works the way it should. And the reason is mitochondria is cellular, which means it is in every single thing in your body.
Exactly.
Now this would normally be the part where I would tell you, but it's only these things. But unfortunately, it's everything. And because of that, it's really hard to treat because no one person on the planet has the exact same symptoms as anybody else. And it can be super severe. It can get worse with age. Sometimes it gets better. But what I do know is this. I explain it when it comes to trying to diagnose it and understand it. If I gave you a bag of 3 billion jelly beans and said pick out the same one twice, your odds are slim to none. So how it affects me mentally is also pretty clear cut. I have a lot of friends with mitochondrial disease, some of whom have passed away recently. That weighs on you. Also, there's just like little voice in the back of your head that's just constantly like, man, your body's getting, beat up and going through it. How much longer do you want to keep going, right? And obviously I tell that, real talk, that voice to shut up because it's, but there are certainly days where my body is tired. It's funny you bring that up because literally last night, my boyfriend and I had this exact conversation because, I was like, listen, we're coming up on our 1-year anniversary, babe. And so at this point, like, because, you know, I had told him about the condition ahead of time, but I was like, at this point, it's time for you to take a word from the West Wing, which is one of my favorite shows, to be read in and to be fully aware of what exactly all this is. And, you know, if you still want to stick around, and obviously said, duh. And I was like, you can ask me any questions you want to ask. And his first question was, he's like, I don't really know how to ask it. So I'm like, it's okay. I know what you want to ask. You can ask it. And he's like, well, how much longer do you think you have left? And I'm like, okay. Yeah, I mean, I get asked that a lot. And the answer is, I don't know.
No one knows.
I told him that, you know, look, the reality is that most people with my condition don't live to be my age. That's cool. All right. But what I also told him is that a lot more people are living to be this age, and that it's really dependent on my ability to want to keep fighting this thing. There are good days and there are bad days, and the bad days are bad, but the good days are great. And I told him, you're one of the reasons that my good days are great. And so, you know, but I did tell him that, yeah, certainly, it's always up and down, right? So how it affects me is also coming back to mental health, because, you know, when you're raised in a society that doesn't value differences, which is inherently its own problem, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, you have someone like me who was skinny in high school, like skinny, like 40 to 50 pounds.
Oh,
middle
wow.
School. Yeah, 40, 50 pounds in middle school before they placed my feeding tube. And, you know, I went to gym class one day and was told I looked like a Holocaust survivor. And I am Jewish.
Horrible.
Yeah, and I'm Jewish by birth, so it was a little bit worse.
Come on.
Yeah, I cannot make this up. And so the next day I had my doctor write me a note excusing me from gym for the rest of my basic public school career. So from basically 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and senior year, I never took a gym class. Because that scarred me that much. As it would anybody.
Like, that was pointed. Pointed. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, middle schoolers are mean, man. Like,
yeah. Kids in general, I mean.
And so, yes, correct. And so, that didn't help. But the mitochondria also affects the brain. And, you know, there's mood swings and all these other things. And then, of course, again, that little voice of being like, well, you know, can I keep doing this? And I think that it's hard. And I know I'm joining on here, but I guess my baseline point is that basically we as a world, not just America, not just Canada, but just like as a society, as a human race, as the world, need to really get a better understanding of how we approach and treat mental health, because right now, this ain't it. Like, the healthcare system as a whole needs to be fixed around the entire world, but especially in mental health, because, you know, in my county, bills have recently been passed that would, in theory, try to make it easier for someone who's having a mental health crisis to call the police to get help. The problem is, in practice, it doesn't work. And that's because my community is afraid of calling for help if they feel like, you know, they're going to get shot.
Exactly.
And I think we need to have a real conversation about how we can fix this, because we can, and I think you would agree with this, we can sit here and talk about how everybody should go and get the help if they feel like they need it, but it's getting rid of these certain built-in biases that lead people to feel like, nah, I'm good. You know, I mean, if you look at the Mental Health of America's website, they'll tell you that, you know, 60% of African Americans have mental illness. 60% of people from the Latinx community have mental illness. 15% of the Asia Pacific Islander. 19% of Native American, and it just goes down the line all the way to 39% of the LGBTQ. But a lot of us are scared to go anywhere because we feel like if we talk to anybody, it could be used against us.
And that's exactly it. Like, whenever I hear, like, I listen to all kinds of different podcasts, and, you know, depending on exactly what they're talking about, whether it is the mental health, or LGBTQ community or whatever it may be, and I hear kind of people say, you know, well, you know, we are making progress. I'm like, are we though? Are we really making progress? Because I would say yes, in some aspects we are, but then in others we're still going backwards, and it's angering. And that's exactly it. You want to keep, and this is why we're doing this episode, is that we want to shed light on all aspects of how mental health can affect you. And yes, there are resources out there for you, but at the same time, you have to be comfortable in doing that. And it is those things, those the biases, as well as that is another word I had on the tip of my tongue and it's now gone. But there just the past kind of saying, well, if you feel this, you're crazy. I mean, they would throw people into asylums if they had like a period, for God's sakes, and they had just a little too much of a hormonal situation. And it's things like that it's like you're still kind of there a little bit. And even today, where you're considered crazy if you even say anything. And there does need to be improvement on that. I don't know what that looks like or what that is, but there does need to be improvement and just feeling like you can talk to somebody and going and getting those resources. But even like with you discussing your mitochondrial disease and, not wanting to talk about that right off because you should be able to be like, this is what I'm dealing with, and not have that fear of being, judged for something that you have no control over. And I can understand that from my perspective with having PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome. Anytime I was in a relationship, like I didn't tell my ex-husband until we were talking about getting pregnant. I was maybe a year or so in. And then even with my current relationship, same thing. I didn't tell him right away. And it's like, but why should I feel scared to tell him something that I don't have any control over?
Right. Well, I think it's because society that would be deemed normal has kind of more or less taught us that we should not talk about these things publicly because it's like taboo. And my response to that is no, it's not taboo. This is a part of who I am. And just because you're having a hard time maybe grappling with that, maybe you just need to not be my friend. But I'm not going to hide everything about who I am, which is why. So I got to ask this question on another podcast, which is, well, how quickly do you tell someone you're dating about your conditions? I tell them I have them on the first or second date, because if they run away, then I know. And then there's a much more in-depth conversation about it as the relationship goes on. Right. But I don't hide that because it's kind of hard to hide it, and I'm not ashamed of it. I mean, look, does it make my life harder? Duh. I mean, but it's not, as the saying goes, if you can't love me at my lowest, then you don't get to be here when I triumph. And that's kind of how I do it.
Exactly. And that's exactly it. And I've have found with my diagnosis, which I've been diagnosed with for 33 soon, so roughly 10 plus years now, and it has its good days, it has its bad days. I don't want to go into this. You can think what you would like to think, listeners, but I do think being doing the COVID vaccination really did screw things up for me personally when it came to my PCOS symptoms, but things I just didn't know that I can experience, and I'm like, oh, lovely. It does have its bad days or whatever, but I'm not ashamed of it. I just learn how to deal with it and learn how I can combat that, because I can to a certain degree, at least with my situation. But it's nothing to be ashamed of, but it can create mental issues, especially now for me as in particular. I think just maybe another question that I have, and then we can probably just close it out at that point. With you being bisexual, as you mentioned before, what kind of have you dealt with? Because again, we're in a society of people who don't always accept. I just recently watched, actually just last night, watched an episode of Station 19, for those who are Station 19 fans, with a very judgmental person basically accusing someone who was bisexual of being quote-unquote confused. Do do you deal with anything on the mental health front? Maybe not so much now, but maybe before you came out or anything like that. Do you have any words of wisdom?
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah. So, for starters, I get a double whammy because non-binary and bisexual, right?
Yeah.
So when I first came out to my grandmother, I was like 14 years old. She was super all about it and just like happy for me to live my best life because we were like that close. And she suggested that I tell my mother. So I kid you not, the story kind of goes like this. My mom was home. I walked into her room, all confident, swung open the door, looked her dead in the eyes, and I said, "Mom, I'm bisexual." And I swear to God, she looked right back at me and said, "No, you are not." And I said, "Yup, I'm joking, ha ha." And that was the end of it. Now,
oh my goodness.
Now that being said, she has since become one of the world's biggest allies and supports me in all of my ways, shapes, and forms. But that conversation made me not tell her again until I was 18. And certainly left the scar, right? That being said, like I said, I am a DJ, and I DJ in a mostly cis gay dominated world of, circuit parties. And there have been a lot of promoters who didn't want to book me because I was non-binary, and that weighs on you, right? But yeah, there are certainly days when it would be like, if I was just willing to change everything about who I was and even lie about what I felt like I was at a certain point, my life would probably be a hell of a lot easier. But I'm not willing to compromise who I am or what I'm about to, I guess take an easier road. And that kind of brings me back to my advice to people who are going through things, which is this. In life, and this is for anyone who can hear me, but in life, there are always going to be people who will tell you that every move you are making is wrong for whatever reason. Sometimes they may genuinely believe that you are making a mistake. Sometimes it may be because they're trying to have you do something that will ultimately be advantageous to them later in the future. Part of being on this planet and part of being a human is the human experience, which is about learning and making mistakes. And my advice to everyone would be the following, which is to say, look, be who you are, right? So long as you aren't hurting anybody else, and so long as you aren't breaking the law, you should be free to live your life however you choose to want to live it. That does that does not necessarily mean that everyone will agree with those choices, but quite frankly, who cares? like I get it. It can be terrifying. Specifically on the grounds of my LGBTQ and trans and non-binary family, this part specifically for y'all, which is say, hey, y'all, sometimes I think my generation grew up just believing that the rights that we have manifested. They didn't. Generations before ours had to fight really hard to get them. And I'm here to tell my generation and the generations after me and before me that we're going to have to fight again to keep them. And that's okay. But one of those steps is essentially not being willing to hide who we are. And so this is where it comes back to acknowledging your mental health. For lack of a better term, this insert choice word weighs on you. And I know it can be tough. And I know it can feel like it's alone, especially if you're in a state where, like, it might seem like the entire government's actively working against you here in the U.S. My notes to you are to remember that even when it is darkest in our world, light is just over the horizon, and that we as a community only survive this and get through this together.
Absolutely. And that's exactly it. I hope for a world that, and again, I have people in my life who, don't fully understand everything but are accepting. I have people who don't understand anything or are not accepting. I'm of the mind of, I only care about you as a person. I don't care about anything else. I am going to advocate for you as a person, and if that means advocating for what you believe in, I'm there. And I just believe in just loving everybody And sometimes that's hard for some people, but I wish we could be in a world where you don't have to come out. Like, I don't want my kids to ever feel like they have to make a big spectacle if they're into, same sex, or if they're bisexual or whatever it is. It's just, okay, that's fine. And I it's unfortunate, but we still are in a world where I'm in a relationship with somebody who he is African. So I do want to put that out there. And some African people can be very conservative in their thoughts. And I did have to make sure of, like, okay, if we're talking about starting a family, I do need to be sure that if we end up having kids that are LGBTQ or queer, let's just say queer just to make it easier, I want to be able to know that they can go to their father and they be accepted as well, not just me as their mother. It's a sad state, but I want to be able to know at some point, sometime, I don't have to do that, or people don't have to do that, just to be sure of, you're going to love my kid and you're going to love your kid no matter what. And I hope for that. But yeah, this has been great. Is there anything else that you want to say?
Yeah, I would just say that, like, look, in The American President, I believe it's President Shepard, which is one of my favorite movies, makes a quote, something I'm paraphrasing here, along the lines of, basically, if you aren't prepared to defend the opposite position, basically, of what you are arguing for, just as vehemently as what you are defending yourself, then we're not really having conversations. And the idea behind that is basically this: we should support the idea of free thinking and differing idea societies. That's good, all right? What's not good is when everybody is apparently everybody else's enemy for everything. My ending note would basically be on this point, which is to say mental health is evolving, and we're learning a lot quickly. And I mean quickly. I mean, for God's sakes, if you had told me 5 years ago that ketamine therapy would be something we'd be entertaining as like a legitimate therapy, and I've had it done, by the way, and it works phenomenally. Like, it has drastically changed my life. So,
well, like, if it's working, I'm happy.
Yeah, and this is coming from someone, and probably the only DJ who will ever meet who is 100% straight edge. I don't drink, I don't do drugs, but I tried that and it worked. But if you had told me that like 5 years ago that would even be on the table, I would have said you're nuts. And so I think in the grand scope of things, mental health can oftentimes be traced back to a lot of major issues we face as a society. But for whatever reason, this is one of those that we just don't ever want to talk about it because it can be messy or hard. And what I would say is that's kind of the point, is that it's not supposed to be the most clean-cut, easy-to-swallow subject. This is supposed to be hard. Like, being a person in the world today is inherently hard.
It is.
And I think that, look, nobody has all the answers. But I guess my closing thoughts would simply just be to talk to each other, less at each other, but to each other. Help your friends. And just remember that we all have to share this rock, and it's the only rock we've got currently.
Yeah, so, until we can maybe go to Mars.
Right, exactly. So we need to figure out real quick how to get along real fast, or we're going to have bigger problems. And that's kind of where I'm at.
I agree. So do you have anything you want to plug? Socials, anything like that?
Yeah, I'm on social media, mostly just at DJ Jake Maxwell. Our event at jakemaxwellproductions.com, and my SoundCloud is DJ Jake Maxwell if you want to listen to my music and stuff. But yeah, I'm around, and for anyone out there, whoever feels like they need someone to reach out to, if you find me on Twitter or Facebook, I am available. So please feel free to reach out, and I will try to help if I can.
Okay, and I will put links to all of that in our show notes as well. But yeah, this has been really a great conversation. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I want to thank Jake for being on the episode. We definitely learned a lot. He had so much information for us that I think is definitely helpful to anyone out there who's experiencing some or all of what he's going through. I think it's great to shed light on most things. So thank you again to Jake. We'll definitely have you on a future episode, as we discussed off the air, quote unquote. But we're now going to transition from that conversation with Jake to a conversation with someone named Laura, where we will be talking about workplace and your mental health when it comes to being in the workplace. So hope you enjoy this conversation we have with her. Okay, so here we are with our conversation on mental health, and we have Laura Jane Layton here with us, and we're kind of just going to be having a little bit of a conversation about, kind of overworking yourself in the workplace and kind of everything that comes with that. But hi, Laura.
Hi, it's nice to be here.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, your message. I know you have a podcast. Just kind of tell us everything, and then we can kind of go into the conversation.
All right, I'll work on that everything part. I am a recovering workaholic. I worked myself not almost to death. Let's put it that way. You know, when you wake up in the hospital and you're going, what did I do?
Yeah.
And it was time to take that step back and reevaluate my priorities. And how do I change me? Because I'm not changing anything else. Nothing else is changeable. I can only fix me. What can I do to let off some of the stress, some of the go? You know, when you're got kids, you've got spouses, you've got employers, employees, and you just do for everybody else but you.
Exactly.
And I really focused on making me a priority. If I don't take care of my health, I can't do all this other stuff. And kind of like that, put your mask on first and then on your kids. And it was like, okay, I can do this. I can try and make sure I do me and then everybody else. And so that was kind of a pretty long road. You know, it's like one step at a time and a process. And I found that the way I talked to myself really was the key changer for me, because I was the one that thought I didn't measure up, instead of I've done enough, I can go home now. You know, it's like I always felt like I had to do more.
Yeah. And I definitely resonate with that, because I'm a legal assistant / a law clerk, and with my job, it's kind of like there's always going to be something that needs to be done. It's never going to be complete in the world of law. It never stops. And it's just kind of knowing when to separate yourself from your job and your personal. And especially during COVID, I wasn't doing the separation. I was doing 2-3 extra hours of work, thinking I have to get this done. And eventually I'm like, okay, no, I have to stop, because I am going to run myself into the ground. The work is always going to be there. And it's not even so much that like my boss puts that on me. It was me putting it on me. And I was like, I need to take a step back, because my mental health is going to get affected if I don't. And, yeah. And again, I think with my father, even him, he has multiple sclerosis now, and I think a lot of that had to do with him constantly working, not knowing when to stop. Also having me as well, and the dedications he had to deal with where I was concerned. And now he is wheelchair bound and can't work now. And he was diagnosed with MS at a very young age. So you kind of have to know when to stop, I guess. And
I find that balance, right?
And it's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to know the balance. But what kind of things would you suggest to people to kind of help with that work-life balance?
I think the key is really when you put yourself first, you've got to communicate it. Nobody else is going to know. You don't go, hey, I'm first, but you say, on Wednesday, I have a must stop at 5:00. I've got other commitments. I'm telling you now, so that if it comes up, I'm going to have to leave. And so when that boss says, oh, here is that one thing I need to have done by the morning, you go, it's Wednesday. I told you I need to be gone, and so you have, if you wait until the moment, then they go, oh, you didn't tell me. And so it's really making sure that you identify your boundaries. What is it that I will and won't do? I used to tell my boss, I am yours completely from 9 to 4. I'm going to work more, but that's when you can count on me. Yes, it's only 8 hours, but I'm working more. But I might not show up till 8 and I might go home at 4. Most of the time I'm going to work more, but that's my guardrail. And just as you start communicating it, you set that expectation where, oh, why were you here so late? I told you. I will be here between these times. And it just gives you that ability to communicate. And if you can't do that, it's not going to happen ever, because you'll feel guilty, you'll feel bad, you'll feel all these things that keep us there. And so I say, number one, figure out your boundaries and communicate them.
And I think that is so important, because I've seen many times people kind of set that standard of, I'm gonna work crazy hours, or, in a hybrid world, I'm gonna come in every day. So you set that standard, it's then expected. So then when you change it up a little bit, even if it's for a day or you permanently or whatever, that your boss is no longer like, well, why aren't you here? Why aren't you working? I expect this, because you've set that standard. So I've learned from my mom, actually, that these are my standards. If I have a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 4 or whatever, I'm going to work those hours. And that's it. I'm not going to do the overtime unless you really have to. Like, there's obviously always going to be a time where you may have an emergency and you have to do some overtime. But if it's going to be a constant thing, then that's where the issues come in with your mental health, because they don't care. They're happy. They're getting their work done, but you're suffering for it. And it's not conducive. But I'm happy that with my boss from day one kind of set that standard of you're not going to have to do overtime or work late or anything like that. That's not expected of you. Because again, when you have people coming in who are younger too, because I started working for him 7 years ago. I was in my 20s. You want to please as well. But that could also be detrimental. So yeah, I mean, I guess also too, maybe the answer might be somewhat similar, but what would you suggest, like the younger generation coming into the workforce now? I guess that would be the Gen Zs now, kind of starting to enter into the workforce. What would you kind of suggest to them in terms of that work-life balance?
You know what I noticed? Go ahead.
Mikel, did you have something to say? Oh, okay. Thank you.
What I have found is those were the people who were my model. Like I was so impressed that they didn't let work take over their personal life. They were the ones that came in whenever they wanted and left whenever they wanted. And if their kid was sick at home, they stayed at home and watched their kid and worked. And I'm just watching these amazing younger generation going, why do I think I have to work 10, 12 hours a day to do an 8-hour job? Of course, I felt maybe that I was making up for inadequacies, but they didn't let work take over their lives. And so I would say, keep owning your life. Keep doing what's best for your overall life, not just work, not just the money, not just the family, not just because we compartmentalize so many things. But when you can integrate it all together, if I can stay home with my kid one day because he's sick and work, whoa, that's cool. When I was in the workforce, it was not allowed. You couldn't even take off sick time if your kid was sick, only if you were sick. And it was just like, life has changed. And I'd say embrace the integrated life when you can do both. And if you feel like you're getting pushback from the older generation, remind them that there's balance to life and that, it's important to have every piece of your life working together, not just work. And I think as we push back and we watch the younger generation be able to do this, it is quite amazing. And I have to say, there was a point in my life when I'd be annoyed when I go, we've got to have this tomorrow. And they're like, I can't. My wife goes to work. And you're like, like I have to have it tomorrow. And it was just, it became an adjustment period for me to learn. So I would also recommend helping the older fellow people who didn't have that latitude to understand, because we were taught to give life away for work. If you didn't work everything your boss said, you were fired. And that's not the case. And so love it. Be and take the time you need for your family.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I do think because a lot of the people in my workplace are a little more closer to my age, with some few exceptions. But I kind of told this story actually on my other podcast, and it's a little darker. But I remember an older coworker of mine who had been working there at my law firm when she was 18 years old. She was in her 70s now, and she was still working. And because her boss, who was also older, insisted that he wants to retire at 80 years old. Again, lawyers tend to not want to give away the control. So there's a whole dynamic there. But I remember saying to her, why stick around with him? Like, you're in your 70s. Like, go, don't work here anymore. Go live life. And unfortunately, we started seeing signs that she wasn't well. And she ended up being diagnosed with cancer. And within 10 months, she passed away. Oh. And she was still actively working. And when she was diagnosed, and it was eventually she did leave, not because she retired, but because she was sick. And it was really eye-opening to kind of see, as sad as it was to see, she literally worked to the end, and for what? But it was also kind of eye-opening to kind of be like, life is way too short. You never know what's going to happen. And there's more to life than my job. And I love my job, don't get me wrong, and I'm dedicated to my job, but I do have to have that balance. And, there's not a day that goes by where I don't think about her and just be like, I hope that we can learn from her, at least people who knew her. But yeah, the other thing too, I think there's also the dynamic of women needing to feel they have to kind of also prove themselves in the workforce. What do you kind of say to that too, Laura, in terms of the women having to prove themselves, especially in a quote unquote man's world?
You know, I do think that we feel like we have to make up for the difference. Mm-hmm. You know, we are usually working full time, raising children, managing a household, and it all stacks up when all of a sudden there's no more you left in the mix. Yeah. If you say to someone, how come we always ask, what do you do? You know, like the answer is a lot. You know, that's because true. We kind of identify with that work person. If someone asked you right now, what do you do? What would you tell me? Probably go to your work, right?
Yeah.
And so when we identify with that, we work hard to protect that identity. What if I lost my job? I'd no longer be a project manager. What if I would still be a mother. I would still be all these other things, but my identity is this corporate woman that works hard, and we protect that. Mm-hmm. And so I really challenge people to take a step back. Who are you? Not what do you do? Who are you?
Yeah.
Are you loving and kind? You can do that everywhere. Are you fierce and fearless? You know, you can do that anywhere. What are those things that are you? And then take them to all aspects of their life. And I challenge you, next time someone says, what do you do? I am a fierce and fearless woman. You know, take it and own it. And they go, it will take, and they'll kind of like step back and go, what do you mean? But that's what I do. I do it in all aspects of my life. Oh, you want to know what job I do? Here it is. But you are you.
That is so true. And I think I definitely have heard that more in the doing a job interview perspective, when usually the interviewer will ask you, tell me about yourself. And it's so hard to answer that question because I'm like, well, you already know that I work in law, or you already know roughly where I went to school. But it's getting down to the core of tell me about yourself. That is so difficult because I'm just like, what do I say? But it's okay because that's kind of shows you have a life outside of your work. You can say the things of, I like to read books, or I like to watch Netflix or whatever, and these are the things that I like to do, or makes me me, or whatever. It's okay in that perspective to go outside of your schooling or your work history or whatever, and talk about what makes you you. But it's I remember when I was interviewing that I had to kind of write that down and coach myself to be like, no, don't say this. Talk about me. And it's so hard in those moments to actually talk about you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mikel, do you have anything you want to add?
Laura, you answered all my questions, so I don't have any. So
you're fine.
So yeah, I don't have any questions for you.
So Mikel, though, with you, because I know you have 2 jobs, and also this podcast, what's kind of your experience with
Basically working like 30 plus hours in the week. And then, yeah, I do have a little free time. I only have like, one day off, like Sunday. And then, that's for me to like, clean up here and there. But like, yeah, it can get exhausting, and it could feel like you're in a loop over and over and
this
over.
is as good as it gets, guys.
Yeah. Every single day it's the same thing. You get up, you go to work, then you come home, and then you get up the next day, go to work. Well, yeah, same thing. So I don't know how I do it. I really don't, but
I think it becomes automatic.
Yeah, just automatically. Yeah.
I think it can come automatic, like running a marathon. Which mile are you at? When you start hitting that 26th mile, that next step is a lot harder than the first mile.
Right.
Lives are a marathon, and you only have so much in us. We can only train. And so it's like, take time between the marathons to recoup. You're going to hit it. You're going to need that time where I just fix or balance my life out and then start running again. And if we don't give us that moment, and if you get just that one day off, what do you do for you? What do you do for you so that when you hit that floor running again Monday morning, you have what it takes to make it through the week?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the biggest thing, because like listening to you, Mikel, kind of say, yeah, I have my day off, but then I clean, and it's like, but that's still another form of a job, right?
Yeah.
And like for me, as much as like I stressed about, not so much like I had surgery, not so much that I stressed about the surgery itself, but I stressed about everything outside of it, my job, home life, all of that. But I realized that like it takes me having a surgery and having to recover from that surgery to just sit in bed and watch Netflix or whatever else. I mean, I haven't watched so much Netflix as I did in the few weeks of my recovery. I just went through all the things, and I'm like, this is great. But then when I get back into my routine, I'm like, okay, now I'm not kind of taking that time for myself. And it shouldn't have to be that way. It shouldn't have to take a surgery or whatever else in your life to finally take that moment to just unwind, not do anything, or do something for you. Right. And it shouldn't have to take something as drastic as a surgery or something.
Are you familiar with the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey?
I think I see. Oh, we have a chapters, just like how you guys have a what's the bookstore?
Barnes and Noble.
Barnes and Noble. There we go. So yeah, I seen that in the chapters. So I have never read it, but I have read similar.
I'm going to tell you one piece of it. Yeah. So in this book, and lots of books have this, but I love the analogy that went along with this. And there's 2 gentlemen having a race of who can cut down the tree the fastest. It's a great big redwood, so it's going to take a lot of effort. And they've got their saws, and they're sawing away. And the one guy sits down, and the guy's going, well, I'm going to get this. I'm going to keep sawing. I'm going to keep sawing. And the other guy gets back up and saws some more and then sits down. He's like, well, that fool, he just keeps sitting down. I'm going to just keep sawing harder and harder and harder. Comes down that the person that was taking the rest cut his tree down first. I was like, how did you do that? You kept sitting down. He says, I wasn't sitting down. I was sharpening my saw. Wow. If we don't take the time to sharpen ourselves, we can run as hard as you want, but you're not going to be as effective. And it's taking those moments that give you that effectiveness that make you more valuable to your employer, to your friends, to your family. It's when I come out and I have the ability to be my best. That's when you are a win.
Well, yeah, that's
Wow.
that's very
Very good
true.
advice.
Yeah, it's like the it's very similar to like the tortoise and the hare too. Yeah, the hare is the fastest, so he thinks he's gonna win the race, but ultimately the tortoise wins, and it's just kind of taking that step back and taking that and just not knowing when to just stop and take a break, or and sometimes, yes, I do understand it can be easier said than done, but I definitely think it's something that is important, and for the work-life balance, and most importantly for all of our mental health, because it's just, again, not worth it.
I think I always knew when I wasn't my sharpest, but I pushed through. I didn't care. It's like, I'm just going to push through, and I can sharpen this out later. But when you start identifying those, I'm really pushing to get through today. Maybe it's time for me to take a break. And that's when you start gaining your power back.
Yeah. Like, I definitely, like, I know there are probably people out there who refuse to take day offs, or, and I mean vacations, not personal time for appointments or something, like just a true vacation. But I've always been, it's always been important to me to take a few days here or a week here. I always take time off during Christmas time, at least 2 weeks. This past year was 3, and I loved it. And when I come back, though, you're refreshed. You're ready to go, even though it might be hard to go back to work, especially after 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But you're refreshed and you're ready to go. So, and you are going to be more valuable to somebody in that circumstance.
Yeah. Sometimes when you come after vacation, you're like, oh man, do I have to go back to work?
But do you also notice when you go back to work, you're like, let's do this thing. I'm ready to go.
That too. Yeah, that too. Yeah, you have that mindset as well too. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, well, do we have any other questions for Laura before we?
Let me just see.
Okay.
Do you value, when you were working, do you value your days off? I know it's a simple question, but yeah.
Absolutely. If you find the things you love and you work those into your day off, you recuperate so much faster than if you just go, I'm exhausted, I'm going to just sit in front of the TV. And that could be the thing you love. I'm not dishing on one thing or another, but what is it that recharges your battery? And if you can find that, do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I agree. Yeah. Okay, that's it. That's all for me. Thank you, Laura.
Yes, thank you, Laura. Do you want to plug anything, podcasts, socials, anything like that? Go ahead and just plug it.
Sure. My podcast is the Laura Jane Layton Show. Pretty easy to find me anywhere on any social. It's Laura Jane Layton. But if you have a hard time dealing with stress or burnout, or just getting your feet on the ground in the morning so that you can run for another 14 hours before you crash in bed again, my podcast can help you find some of those ways to manage that stress and take back time for you. So my last minute of words of wisdom would be, find that thing that recharges your battery and implement it.
Right. I agree. I think that is definitely important.
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for having me here.
Thank you for being on.
Wow.
This was great.
Yeah, I learned a lot. Yeah.
So thank you again to Laura for being on the show.
Awesome
It
guest.
was awesome. I think that was so insightful. Hopefully everyone kind of took from that and will apply that to their life, because I think, again, that work-life balance is so important for just your mental health. So I think it was great.
100%.
So yeah. So now we're going to be going into another conversation with Sheldon, who is actually, Mikel, you want to take it away?
Yeah, he is my brother.
Yeah.
He is my brother.
Yes.
My younger brother. So he's going to be on the next segment on this episode. And we're going to be talking about
stuff.
I'll say some stuff. Yeah.
Stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, stuff. Yeah. So,
okay. All right. So,
all right.
Mikel, you wanna?
So you want me to introduce? Okay. So,
well, yeah, he's your relative. Let's do it.
So, here is my brother Sheldon. Do you want to introduce yourself a little more, bro?
Sure. Okay. So my name's Sheldon, Mikel's brother. What can I say about myself? So yeah, 32 years old. I live in Ottawa from Toronto. I've worked in health administration for the last 5+ years now, and so most of my work has been in the mental health sector. So very much looking forward to talking about mental health. I think it's a very important topic, and I'm very passionate about it, and I do a lot of work in this area. So yeah, looking forward to speaking about it and seeing what kind of questions come my way for this.
All right.
Yeah.
Tanyka, you want to go in first, or you want?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, go first. Go first, because I only have 3.
Oh, you know what, Mikel? You kick it off. You start off.
Oh, you want me to start off? Okay.
Yeah.
So so you're very great in this area, Sheldon. Do you feel you ever that you have been affected by feelings of edginess and anxiety or nervousness in any type of situation?
100%, I would say, without doubt, I lived with anxiety. It's something that, I have discovered through therapy. Know really what I was feeling or what I was experiencing when I was young, and having these moments of anxiousness, as well as stress, as well as worry. And it really, I think at that point, it was kind of, this is just normal. This is just the way my brain is programmed and how I'm supposed to be feeling. But I never really delved into it, because it wasn't at that point, like mental health wasn't much of a topic in schools. It wasn't really in our family. Mom never really talked about it. We never really talked about it. So it wasn't up until, in my university years, when I was very stressed about exams, all the different competing priorities. And I started noticing that, like, I was really getting into a very anxious state that I wasn't able to naturally just get out of. And I was kind of concerned, but very much like didn't do much about it even at that point, other than just like use it as a means to like push through, but never really manage it. So yeah, from there, definitely because I never really managed it, I never really addressed it, my anxiety worsened up until mid-20s, and to a point during the pandemic, at the beginning of the pandemic, where I decided that I needed to seek therapy. So that's kind of like my journey, and it's been a continuous, I wouldn't even call it a battle. It's more so just like learning experience and journey, and understanding, what my anxiety is, how it impacts my life, how it could be, I think, a positive element as well, and also as well understanding what are the different mechanisms and tools in my toolbox to better manage my anxiety. So yeah, no, definitely it's been a journey, but without doubt, I would say anxiety is something I've been managing and living with over most of my life. I would say I can think to even remember young Mikel and like having moments of like anxiousness, thinking about mom coming home and like things not being done, and like my body into like either a complete shutdown or our moment of like panic.
Right. So
and sorry, Mikel. I think
no, go ahead.
I can relate with that. I think, I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of different cultures that deal with that, but I think being in a Jamaican household and having that expectation of, okay, you have to go to school and then you have to come home and you have to do the homework, but you're also home, so you better make sure the dishes are done, do this or that or whatever, and then it not be done, and then you have your parent come home and be like angry that why wasn't this done?
Oh.
And and that adds to the anxiety that we deal with. So I definitely relate with that.
I always wonder if it's like, if this is something in which I built, or something that was like, I've always had it kind of programmed, but due to these kind of like compounded scenarios of living in like a very strict household, where we don't really talk about certain things, and like you have to internalize your feelings, that it manifested in ways that was kind of uncontrollable from my end. But 100, without doubt, like I think there's a cultural piece to this as well, and that we don't talk about mental health. If we do talk about mental health, we're seen as crazy or mad, or all this, or we say, our parents say, pray to God and everything will be fixed. But with that, it's a cultural piece as well that I'm fully aware of, and that's what people about.
I agree.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, I mean, my family has never been like, we're obviously from Jamaica too, but my family's never been the family that's like, pray to God and God will deal with it. Because I'm a firm believer of, yes, you can pray to God and that be one avenue, but that shouldn't be your only avenue. But even though mental, and me and Mikel talked about this in the beginning, even though mental health runs in my family and it's not necessarily a secret, there are still things that were left as a secret that we don't have the full picture on. My mom doesn't have the full, because my mom really suffers with panic attacks and that anxiety aspect too, but we didn't know like the full picture of the amount of family members on that side of the family that suffers with it. And it's like, why not? And a lot of that, yes, is the culture of, we don't want to shed light on that, because yes, you are seen as crazy, or maybe you might have some family members think you're being delusional, or you're somehow putting that on yourself, and it's not healthy either, because then that's just another generation where it's like, okay, either you learn from it and you say, okay, it's okay to put this out here, or you don't learn from it and you continue that cycle of just burying it and I feel like it's not actually happening. I have my one question that I can think of right now from that conversation was the importance of the Black community talking about their mental health, and in particular our Black men talking about their mental health and getting whatever help they need, because even though I think we're headed in the right direction, there's still so much work that needs to be done with really men in general, but definitely with Black men. Sheldon, what do you kind of have to say to that?
Yeah, without doubt, I think there's I'm definitely seeing headways in respect to support and resources that's targeted towards Black communities, and I'll be specific and say that we should be referred to as Black communities, but we're not just one type of people. There's there's cultural relevance, there's religious relevance, there's different Afrocentric Caribbean backgrounds that practice and are completely vastly different from like someone that a family would meet from Jamaica versus a family you would meet from Ghana. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I say when we speak about our community that we should definitely pluralize it, because I never want it to be seen as kind of like a one size fits all. If any sort of like resources or information or better kind of allocation of research gets put out there, and there, and I've worked in this space, and like a lot of research is like support the Black community, but it's like, what Black community, which one? But like without doubt, I think putting more attention towards Black mental health is important. It's critical. I think as we look at the family structure, I think generally, and maybe this is a generalization, but without doubt, men have a significant importance and involvement in the family structure of so many different Black communities. And I think it kind of starts there first, to support those individuals in the family structure to then support their family. And so we're not seeing situations of absent fathers. We're not seeing situations of fathers who don't have the mental or emotional capability to parent and be there for their spouse or partners. Because I feel like as we see, a lot of intergenerational trauma is unfortunately due to the fact of broken families and expectations around that, or even just assumptions that like a Black family has is broken, and there's a single mother and the father's absent, and like, what does that do to the child, right? So I think there definitely has to be more support towards servicing Black men and their mental health, because I think not only, to your point, Tanyka, that it kind of goes down the family line of like mental health, where it's ignored and not talked about. But if men are not feeling that support, then how are they going to better be there for their family and show up for their families and their other support networks? But without doubt, I think it's important that there is focus around Black mental health, and I think that will have a trickle-down effect across different communities, especially since we do see a lot of Black men in positions of leadership and quote-unquote power across different communities. So I'm thinking like pastors and leaders and community leaders and advocates and politicians and all this. So I think it's very important that Black men get the mental health that support that they need, and that they don't feel stigmatized when they do that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking, like, Mikel, I know we were talking about this when I was back in Toronto a couple of weeks ago, and I was saying like, oh, you should like consider therapy, right? And you were saying like, oh, like, not that bad, like I'll get over it, or like, I don't really need it because of X, Y. Yeah. I'm like, no, that's not it. Like, therapy should not be seen as a reactive kind of approach to what you're dealing with. It should be perceived as like, this is maintenance towards my mental health, right? We go to the doctor for general checkups. We should be going to therapy, or going to kind of therapeutic measures to support our mental health as well, for maintenance and support.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And I did say this to Mikel earlier too, because like he kind of said like, I don't really have like, I tend to avoid, and I know you weren't saying avoid, but you were kind of saying I tend to just avoid, or not let things get to me or whatever. And I said to him like, well, is that maybe your way of coping? Because what are you what are you afraid of confronting if you were to do this? So there could be, I 100% on Sheldon's side with this. I think that with therapy, and I've said I'm an advocate for therapy. I'm an advocate for therapy in the sense of, like Sheldon said, it's not something to be there because now you're dealing with some sort of stressor. It should be there to be also, could be used as preventative, or you can use it as a way of be able to have a conversation with a third party who isn't close to you and can give you tips and tricks or whatever tools that you can use. But I do think in your case, Mikel, that it could be good for you to have this. And I think you would see how beneficial it is. Like I've said it to my boyfriend too. Like, unfortunately, with his job, which is a whole separate conversation, it's no longer offered to him and his benefits for him to use therapy. It was, and now it's not, which is, you don't even get me started on that. But I've always said to him, go to therapy, get help, do what you gotta do. And even at times where he thought, oh, I don't need this, and there was obviously times where he did, like, okay, I do need this, he's definitely taken those things and applied it to his life, or any other thing that he had to do, he's applied it. You never know, Mikel, you might benefit from it. And I mean, if you have benefits, like, it would be covered. And yeah, you just never know.
Okay.
Yeah, it's true. You truly do never know. And, not to get into our personal family business, but we have been through traumatic events through our childhood and years. And so I know Mikel can easily kind of put that stuff aside and be like, that's the past. I think we're also kind of nurtured into that kind of belief as well. But I think, things manifest in different ways, and maybe because my trauma has manifested in anxiety doesn't mean it will manifest in anxiety for Mikel, or manifest in other ways, right? It could manifest in the way of how you communicate, how you are present with the people that you love, the people that you're around, how you see yourself, your confidence. But yeah, I think I completely agree with you, Tanyka. It's therapy comes in different forms and formats. So I think, if there's any opportunities for anyone to seek it, it should definitely be sought. And and to your question before, it's that much more. It's so much more important, especially for Black men.
Yes. So, Mikel, you have another question, right? You said you had 3.
Oh, all right. So speaking of generations and everything else. So do you think newer generations is bringing more awareness than the older generation in terms of mental health?
Oh, 100%. I think, especially since the newer generation was at home during the pandemic, and a lot of them were brought to media outlets and different forms of information, where mental health was very much kind of like the top area of focus, and very much like you're seeing a lot more advocacy around it, a lot more funding around it, a lot more kind of resourcing around it, that I think the new generations are very much in tune with that. I think we're just generally seeing that newer generations are just so much more open and looking to dismantle and sort of the patriarchy, as well as a sort of preconceived kind of expectations around how to be, and that maybe came from previous generations, such as the boomer generation. I think definitely we're seeing that younger people are putting a lot more effort into this area, bringing a lot more attention to this area. But I can see as well that there's kind of like this friction between younger people wanting and advocating for more mental health support, and being there for themselves and showing for themselves, but at the same time older generations kind of I get added the cultural relevance here, that older generations may not be as supportive or have that kind of buy-in for the youth or different younger generations.
Yeah, because the older generation used to make fun of the people who have mental illness. Back. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say 100%. I think, unfortunately, there's so many variables to why that is. Like, I think media had a huge play.
Yeah,
and still has a huge play in our perception of what mental health is, and even just like the language of it, right, has changed so much over the years. Like,
right, yeah.
Like mental illness, and that's perceived as like that individual has no capability or kind of or ability to support their mental health because it's seen as an illness. So it's almost like seeing them as less than, and they were seeing like language now, just like general mental health, understanding that it's like on a spectrum, and that people have varying levels of mental health, like our general health, that, you know, it could be good, it could be bad, it could be mediocre, it could be, you know, at a point where you need help, at a point where you're able to help yourself. So I think, you know, there's definitely the language, the understanding, the education around mental health has definitely advanced significantly, and I think the youth are very much pushing that forward and very much making that happen.
Yeah, and I mean, and the thought of, you know, the older generation kind of making fun of the newer generation and the mental health and all that.
Yeah,
it's sad to see that, because there's no way that the older generation got away scot-free. It's
right.
It's factual. They didn't, and but it's just that you're being taught from generation to generation to, you know, pretend like it's not happening, bury it deep, and you know, because you'd be weak, quote unquote, if you were to express, the whole trope of, like, you know, man up or whatever, or grow up. It's like, that is such a toxic way of thinking. And although, like, you have to kind of train yourself to not say certain things or whatever, that's better than making fun of or pretending like it didn't happen or telling someone to just get over it, because you're not gonna just get over it.
Exactly. I think, like, it's so funny you say that, like, the old generations did not to say that the old generations did not have mental health concerns or issues would be completely just, like, far-fetched in that thinking, because I think, like, now, like, I look at older generations, I'm like, I think there's something there, you know what I mean? I think they're either, you know, that person may be neurodivergent, or there might be some sort of other mental health concern that they've been able to either mask or normalize, or, you know, they've been able to cover up. Like, I think, like, you know, I remember, like, growing up and, like, seeing, like, going to certain family homes and, like, seeing, like, just a mass amount of, like, items, like, stuff that people collected, and, like, almost, like, borderline hoarding. Like, that is, you know, could be classified as a mental health disorder.
Yes.
But, you know, at that time, it was kind of perceived as, oh, like, you're just, like, keeping all of your belongings, right?
Yeah, you're a pack rat.
A collector. Yeah.
You're a collector, exactly. So it's like, anyhow, like, things were, like, reclassified or masked from previous generations, and, like, now it's like they're bringing more red. It's like, oh no, like, this could be, there's something here, right? And, like, let's address it so that person can have a better and healthier lifestyle.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's it for me in terms of questions. Do you have any more questions, Tanyka, in terms of anything else?
I mean, I don't think so. I mean, I kind of piggybacked off your questions and then made my own questions. So, no, I don't think I do.
Sheldon, do you want to make, like, a little statement in terms of mental health, or do you have
no, I think I would have end things off by saying that there's a lot of free resources that are available out there to support people's mental health. You can definitely, you know, go to your you know, local community centers, your place of worship. It may not be labeled as mental health support, but there are kind of both overt as well as explicit means of mental health services that are out there. And, you know, go to different websites and see what's out there that might be good for you. So definitely, you know, mental health support doesn't have to look like, you know, you being on the couch and you're speaking to a psychiatrist and that they're diagnosing you with the X, Y, and Z. I think there's so many different options now. And so definitely take your time when it comes to seeing what works for you. When I was looking for a therapist, it was very important for me to find someone that studied and understood, Black mental health, especially specifically for men, and what's Black individuals as well. And I found that particular perspective very much helped in respect to my journey and my support of what can be provided to me for mental health care, because they just understood the context, right? So I always say that, like, if one thing doesn't work, move on and find something else that will work. Because there is something, and we're very fortunate in this country where there are a number of resources and tools and services that do support, but definitely it takes a little bit of time, takes a little bit of patience. I would also plug that there's the suicide line that was launched. I forget when it was launched exactly, but it was launched last year, I think close to the end of last year. So that's 988. And so if anyone that's needing this type of support, they can call 988, and it's a free service that's available for everyone across Canada. And so I would say, if you or someone else here in your life is experiencing an event or episode in which their life is at risk, I would highly encourage people to call 988 and see what kind of resources that can be provided through that.
Okay.
That's great.
All right.
Yeah.
Do you want to plug anything else, Sheldon? I know you don't have any social media.
I'm not that's on social media like y'all.
Okay.
Let's get to anyone. Mikel, Tanyka, feel free to direct them to me, and I'm happy to help anyone out that's like looking. Look forward to kind of navigate this very complicated health system that we live in, and especially that much complicated with the mental health sector as well.
All right. Thank you for being on our podcast, Sheldon.
Thanks for coming. This was a great way to spend my Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So, do we have anything else we want to say before we close out?
I certainly learned a lot from these two individuals, including, Laura and my brother. Yeah, it's pretty insightful stuff. Asking them questions about, workplace mental health and mental health in general, and even talking about our mental health as well, Tanyka. So, yeah, that's basically it. That's what I have. Do you have anything else?
No, I don't. No, I have nothing else.
Okay. All right. So this ends episode 34 of the Next Take podcast. The Next Take podcast is available on all podcast platforms. We also have a website called solo.to/Next podcast. Where else are we at, Tanyka?
On Facebook and Instagram at Next Take Podcast. And we are on TikTok and Twitter at Next Take Pod.
Okay. And also you can contact us at mikeltanyka@gmail.com. Yeah, this was a lot today.
It was a lot. But again, definitely take in everything that was said here by Laura, by Sheldon, and apply as much as you can, get the resources. They're all out there. Yeah. All right.
Okay. All right. So I'm Mikel.
And I'm Tanyka.
We are out until next week. Peace, everybody.
Bye.